Welcome back. I'm Kim Bailey, she's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec. We're continuing our discussion today with Alexander Lowry, and we pick up the discussion talking about whether senior executives should be developing their people skills or their technical skills.
So from my point of view, the robots are coming, but they will never take all the jobs.
Okay.
And the reality is that we can build great processes, systems, and they'll need tinkering, they'll need fixing, the regular changes, rules, things like that. But what you can never change are the human interaction skills. You can never change the leadership skills. We're never going to follow the robot from the front of the room because he's a great orator, right? It's the natural human interactions. And an example for me would be Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO and chairman of JP Morgan, where I was. Now, granted, the man must have an eidetic memory because he never forgets the face or the story, and he is the best banker of the generation. He knows everything in the world. He can talk on every subject. He's phenomenal. People associate him as a leader. Now, the reality is he is abnormal. He is special. He is unique. But the point is that's a leader. You could never replace him with a robot.
No.
I don't know how you get past having the right people at the top of the house to set the right example.
Along those lines, do you see that there are tasks that you could identify that will never be anything other than people carrying them out?
When I think about leadership, so for example, one of the things that I do, one of my side fun activities is I've got a podcast called Boardroom Bound. Mm-hmm. And we recently had an episode where Pat Harnden was on it. She runs basically the leading ethics organization in America. And she was telling a story, and she said, you need to understand the importance of leadership. And it is this, that if you as a leader, CEO of the company like Jamie Dimon, if you are not regularly talking about ethics, what matters to the business, setting the right example, not going to jail, right? You're actually talking about the right things, doing the right things, and telling employees the right thing, and plus that message gets filtered down to the frontline boss because you got to have both people in line. If you do not do that, if you're just quiet on the subject, people will not only assume, they will believe that the organization is unethical and doing things wrong and it's okay to do those. I thought that was fascinating in a very scary way. You cannot replace that. That people element is essential. And there's examples of like that we can take from different subjects. But that was just a great reminder to all of us of how important that CEO situation is. We need to be producing people who are going to be in leadership positions, who are going to just do the right thing if we want to boil it down. We can see in every country around the world if we want to call them bad apples that are setting a bad example that eventually get caught. And a lot of people don't get caught. That's just the way of the world. People write it off. Oh, it's finance, it's the business world. That's not okay.
It's interesting because before we came online, we were actually having a discussion about a board that we both have some experience with who are going through exactly that. And it's a cultural thing in terms of where these people have come from that are sitting on the board, and that they think it's okay. And if one person on the board starts to address it, they're the pariah. They're the ones that are doing something wrong, and just being able to support that person and say, just keep going, just keep doing it, because that's the important task, is the change. Do you see that there is an organisational culture of acceptance for that lack of ethics?
It's really hard to quantify that, and here's why. When we see newspaper articles about bad companies, bad boards, bad situations, Uber was a great example, or CBS Viacom in the U.S., where there was a complete fail by management and the board. We can look at that and shake our fingers and say, that's bad. But we never know when it's been good, right? There's not like we can say on the opposite side, oh, these people did their job. Did they get lucky? Were they smart? Were they effective? The reality is the board is there to save the corporation, the future of the corporation, obviously for the benefit of shareholders. And it's sometimes really hard to know inside those closed-door secretive rooms how it's going. And for us, that's part of what we think about. We're hiring someone not just for their first job. We want them to advance their career, to get to the suite, to get to the boardroom, because we need ethical leaders through all of those things. So your question is a good one. We should always be evaluating that ourselves when we are board members, but it's hard to know from the outside.
If you to ask your students, what are the top 3 things they're looking for when they looking who to work for after their degree? So we always talk about what sort of person you pick for the organization. I want to know what the current young and up-and-coming executives are looking for in an employer.
It's interesting. I think most of us will reflect back for multiple generations. We think about our parents, our grandparents, what they were willing to sign up for versus what we are signing up for, what we think our children will be signing up for. And if we go back to the old days, because you were looking for one job for life, you were going to join IBM and you could stay for 40 years and you were going to get a gold watch and you're going to retire to pension and everybody was happy. That is not the world anybody lives in anymore. And certainly in America, there's a whole lot of unfair negative press around the young generation. Oh, they're not willing to work hard. They want to be the CEO on day 2. There's a bit of an element behind that, but it's really about they want to be in jobs where they can add value. They are not willing to sit through a lot of BS. They want to be progressive quickly in the sense that they feel like they have skills that need to be used. Now, not everybody's ready to be the CEO very fast. And one of my guests, we were recording a podcast episode today, and she said a boss gave her the feedback, said, you act like you're in the board and the C-suite ready to add the value, but you're not actually ready to be in there yet. She said that was a good recognition. I need to earn my stripes. You got to move up the ranks to get the experience you need. And there are people today that really want to join jobs where they're doing something that they feel adds value, not only to the company, but society. They're looking for organizations where they get an opportunity to have paid time off to build houses for Habitat for Humanity or work at the local humane society, where they feel like the company's doing some good in society. As much as the company values and cares about them, there are so many great stories in America of companies that are trying to stay ahead, not by just paying a little bit more than the average, because that's a nice thing, but also they have generous maternity or paternity benefits. They have a company culture that rewards, encourages, accepts employees. And we're not just willing to sit in dark cubes anymore, slaving away for 1,000 hours, waiting for a boss who might hopefully one day recognize them and give them a promotion.
That's good.
So 2 things come to my mind out of that is that do you see that we should be encouraging people to think about staying longer in organisations?
That's an interesting question, and it depends on the hiring manager. So I think it also a little bit on industry, right? So we might say the tech industry doesn't feel that way. You can jump every 6 months. That's probably okay. Where certain industries like banking, they might expect you to be there for several years at a minimum. But it also, I think, depends on the hiring manager. So if the person who's hiring you is 20, 25 years old, they might not care if you've had 5 jobs in 5 years. If the person who's hiring you is 55 years old, let's say you took your first job for a year and it wasn't a good fit, you went somewhere else, you worked there for 6 months, the company went bankrupt, you went to another startup, you were there for a year, now you want to join JP Morgan, they'd say, why would I hire you? You're a job hopper. So it's so hard to know for sure, but I guess you always need to be able to tailor the message to your audience. So my personal view is, if you jumped after 6 months, you never had an opportunity to learn from the experience. And someone might say, I've got a bad boss, I'm at a bad company. I think, well, that's really good, but it's sort of like a relationship. It's when you're dating. If you don't, let's say if you don't marry the person, maybe it wasn't a great fit, but as long as you took things away from it, here's things I do like and don't like for my future partner, for my future relationship. I've learned from that, and that's valuable. Let's say I get hired to be a box packer. My own mentality is I'm going to be the world's best box packer. You are going to see me. You're going to want to promote me. I am that good. And after 6 months, if I really busted my butt and I'm ready for the next one, they don't see that, well, then I probably need to go somewhere else for the value. But I've learned all I can from that job. It's not because on day 2, when I know I'm the world's best box packer, they should promote me. It doesn't quite work that way.
Yeah. The other thing that came to mind while you were talking previously was that perhaps as organisations, we are not recognising and rewarding as much as we should. So the feeling for these people is that I have to get to be the executive level because that's where you get recognition and reward, and you don't get it until you get to that point. So that's where I'm heading. And should we as organisations be looking at what we do at every level to recognise and reward people so that they are feeling that they're a voice in the organisation and that we appreciate their efforts?
I'm remembering one of my other classes back at work, and it was basically talking about people management. And I remember that distinctly in the day the professor said we were sort of wrapping up the course, and we talked about all of these methodologies to run a good company, to incentivize staff. And she was summarizing, and she said, at the end of the day, the most and best way to incentivize people is money. Everybody looked around the room like, we haven't talked about this for the whole semester. She said, you can never get it right. It's impossible. You cannot get it right. That's why it doesn't work. That's why we talk about everything else. So in a utopian society, you would just pay people appropriately. But we've seen examples where companies have fiddled with this model over the last couple of years. There was a company in Seattle where the CEO said, I'm going to be fair. I'm going to pay everybody the same wage because I don't want to screw over any of the young people. Now, if you just started there you were pumped because you got this mega bonus. But if you've been the superstar there, if you've been the performer several years, and suddenly everybody's now making the same money you did, you left the next day because you're not getting rewarded appropriately.
Yeah.
Money is a part of it, but to the point you're also making, it's the messaging, right? The messaging that junior person heard was like, wow, you care about me. You're going to look after me. The messaging the other person heard was, actually, I don't care about you. I don't care if you're my top performer. I'm going to treat everybody the same. Really hard to get that right.
I can go back to some sessions I used to run with senior executives where I'd ask them that exact question, and they had to do for me a list of what they thought was most important in the team that they were leading, and never, ever was their list the same as what the employees would put together, because the executives always thought that money was their number one, the employees' number one consideration, and the employees generally had it no higher than 7 on their list of 10. And there was a whole lot of other
I've always
things.
found that a thank you is a big thing, right?
yes.
So if you remember someone's birthday, if you remember someone's anniversary, if you will go around and thank them, I know you worked really hard the last week to get this project done. We would not have made it without you. Your efforts noticed, appreciated. That goes such a long way. It doesn't solve everything, but it really helps.
It's the recognition and it's the personal interaction. Combined, it's very, very powerful.
I think it's important also to know that, as you said, it's a relationship and you've got to respect it both ways. When you were talking about people seen as job hoppers, I had a recent example where the interviewer has pointed out to this person that they are job hopping, and why. And the person had the presence of mind and the right temperament and respectful tone and said to the potential employer, well, how long are you guaranteeing my job for if I was the successful applicant? And I think we've got to remember that we're expecting one thing, but we're saying, we've got to restructure, we've got to move on, and we churn people as well.
Well, I think if I go back to that dating analogy, right, I think employment is like that. As long as it's really fun and interesting and good for both sides, it continues. But whenever it stops being for either side, the relationship ends.
And it's really no different to buying a new house. I was always told that you have to live in a house for 12 months for every season until you do anything to the house so that you know exactly what happens. And jobs shouldn't be any different.
Well, just as long as it's not like buying a boat. Do you know the story about there's 2 good days for a boat owner?
Yeah, the day they buy it, the day they leave, they lose it. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, I'm in the yachting fraternity. I probably hear that every season. We have a couple of other questions. One that we've asked of a few people who have a dual role. It's really in terms of priorities and time management. So how do you determine your goals when you have this educational role as well as a business role?
I'm a firm believer in you can't achieve what you don't measure, right? So my mindset is what gets measured gets achieved.
Yep.
But perhaps the corollary to that is what gets rewarded gets done first, right? But that just shows you I come with a business mentality. That's the way that I approach education, and I think that's probably why I butt heads a bit with some people in the faculty space at the university. But I come from a place of love. I think if we move business this way, we'll be more effective. We will be more profitable. We will be therefore better able to serve our students, our shareholders, our stakeholders, if you will. So for me, I'm business first. But also, as I'm part of the faculty, I am a professor there, so I recognize our duty is to serve our students well. But I think often we can best serve them if we come with the business mentality. So my job is to build and launch the Master's in Financial Analysis program to the best that it can be, and that includes the standard of education within it. And therefore, I hold myself to a high standard from my class. But to me, that is a part of the overall business that we're running.
Just one last question. We're almost done. We ask it of all our guests, and we don't give you warning beforehand because we want to hear your on-the-spot thinking. Quite a simple question. It is, if we were having this conversation in 12 months' time, what would you like to look back on and be really satisfied that you had achieved?
Well, I know if the president of my school were answering this, he would say that we would have about 10,000 students in the class. So that's probably the goal we're working towards, which will definitely not be this year. Right? That's never my goal. I'm never going to get to that scale. But in 12 months' time, which sort of, as we talked about before in terms of the employer relationships, the brand that we are building, not only of the school, but of the students, of the caliber that are coming out. And clearly, the numbers will grow over time of who we're producing, putting out there. But, part of my job is sort of a chicken egg thing. I've got to bring in really good students and help open the doors for really good opportunities, but then they can go out and begin making a difference. And that becomes a pay it forward methodology, because they'll be impacting business, doing well for those businesses who will learn about our students and our school and our education, will therefore want more of them. It becomes a self-fulfilling process. So if a year from now our brand has grown even stronger and more students are attracted to the program, the right kind of students for the right reasons, I will be chuffed.
That's excellent. We do thank you very much for your time today and for all of that background and information, and we certainly wish you well with the increase in students and technology, and we look forward to hearing how that is going. We'll put all the links that you have given us onto the webpage so that people can be in touch with you or have a look at what opportunities there might be to be outplaced students in the technology side of things in the years to come. But Alexander, thank you very much for joining us today.
It was my pleasure. Have a wonderful day.
That is the second part of our discussion with Alexander Lowry. We will have the links for his own podcast at the bottom of our webpage. But for now, I'm Kim Bailey, she's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec.